Okay, so first and foremost, we see this is from the Meru to the hieroglyphic dictionary. People are accustomed to seeing the female divinity Maat, various different spellings of the name of the divinity. Of course, the female divinity goddess, personification of law, order, rule, truth, right, righteousness, divine law, and so forth. But we also have the male deity MAA, the god of law, order, truth, integrity, etc. So first we're going to look at our Kukutuntum, the ancestral jurisdiction. We released the Kukutuntum ancestral jurisdiction in 13,002, which is the Gregorian calendar year 2002. Now, we're just looking at this quickly. You look on page 28 in the Kukutuntum. We talk about laws, the expression of order, divine laws, the expression of divine order, the laws governing Afurakani society are expressions of divine order. Afurakani man, Afurakani woman are two halves of a whole with a balance of one another. We talk about Aminet and Amen, two halves of the divine whole. They have the balance of one another. Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, who are the grandchildren of Amen and Aminet, the supreme being, two halves of the divine whole. Ka and Ka'et, the black substance of space, spiritual force that governs the black substance of space. They are two halves of the divine whole and so forth. So we talk about the divine order which permeates all of creation as the basis from which our cultural laws are born. We go further and we say when we attune ourselves, and we're talking about ritually, when we attune ourselves to Amen, Aminet, the great father and great mother supreme being called Nyame and Nyamewa and Akhan and Olorun and Olokun and Yoruba and Lisa Mawu and Vodun and so forth, Kolotielo and Katieleo in the Senufo tradition. When we attune ourselves ritually to Amen and Aminet, we place ourselves in the position to know what is good for us and what is not good for us, what is needed and what is not needed, how to live and how not to live, how to function and how not to function. Through ritual, we place ourselves in position to be fed by the divine force of law and balance in creation, whose male name is Ma'a, and whose female name is Ma'at. It is through the god Ma'a and the goddess Ma'at that Amen, Aminet establishes male and female balance in creation. It is these children of Amen, Aminet that govern the center of balance within our bodies, within the operation of our spirits, within creation. When we attune ourselves to Amen, Aminet in order to know right from wrong, what is necessary and what is not necessary, these spirits of divine law and balance, Ma'a and Ma'at, transmit the truth, the law, the divine order of Amen, Aminet to us. We then harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with the law. It is through Ma'a, Ma'at that we are able to balance what we desire with what is in harmony with divine order. It is through Ma'a, Ma'at that we establish good care. We published that in 13,002, so-called 2002, meaning we released it. Kukutuntum first came out as a 3-CD set. Then we published this transcript later, but we released it 18 years ago. That was the release of the publication. But of course, we were invoking these divinities ritually, as we're speaking about here through ritual, for over 2 decades. So this information isn't new with regard to what we've been publishing. We've been talking about Ma'a and Ma'at for over 2 decades. Now, we have some individuals who talk about ancient Khanate and Kemet. This is inclusive, number one, of the whites and their offspring, but then also some of our people who get involved in the study to a certain extent regarding ancient civilizations or looking into cosmology and looking into language and things like that. They talk about Ma'at consistently, but because the whites and their offspring don't talk about the divinity Ma'a because they don't know his real function in creation, then our people don't talk about Ma'a. In the same fashion, because the whites and our offspring don't focus on Ra'et, the creatress, then we don't focus, some of our people don't focus on Ra'at. They talk about Ra or Amen, Ra, and so forth, but they don't talk about Ra'at, the creatress, and Amenet, Ra'at. We've been talking about Amen, Amenet, Ra, Ra'at, Khan, Kayat, Ma'an, Ma'at from the beginning. Ma'an, Ma'at are the expansive pole of divine order. That means they're the expressive pole of divine order. When you have order, when it is expressed, as we say in the Kukutuntum, law is the expression of order. If someone says put something in alphabetical order, you must understand the laws that express alphabetical order. So B comes after A, C comes after B, D comes after C, and so forth. So once you know the laws that express that order, then you can fulfill the charge that you've been given to put something in alphabetical order. Laws express order. They are the expressive or expansive pole of order. Ma'an, Ma'at are the male and female forces that govern the expansive pole of order. One half of the creative order of creation is Ma'an, Ma'at. When you talk about divine law, the law that undergirds all of creation, Ma'a is one half of that, Ma'at is the other half of that. Expansive and contractive forces. There is no creation without the God, the Ntoro Ma'a. Just like there is no creation without the divinity, the female divinity, Ma'at. Ma'a is one half of the divine law that undergirds the entire universe. That's always been the case. But since some of our people have followed the misguided path of the whites and their offspring, on one hand, they simply focus on Ma'at because that's what the whites and their offspring do. The whites and their offspring focus on Ma'at and divine law and morality and so forth if they're writing about certain texts. So then our people follow suit. And the only thing that they do is repeat what the whites and their offspring are saying, but they will say, well, first and foremost, this civilization was a black civilization. But outside of pointing out the fact that it was a black civilization, they go forward and explain it in the same way that the whites and their offspring do. They just explain it through a black, lens. But when we deal with ancestral religion, we actually deal with these forces in nature. We invoke them on a regular basis. So we've always known who Ma'an, Ma'at are. They exist in the Yoruba tradition, they exist in the Akan tradition, they exist in the Ebe tradition, the Vodun tradition, every tradition across the board. And of course, into North America, in the United States, in the Hoodoo tradition, which is Akan, and Voodoo tradition, which is Ebe, and Juju tradition, which is Yoruba, and so forth. And we're going to prove all of that. Then you have other individuals who, because they have been misinformed, and they have been misinforming our people because they've been misinformed for years, some of them decades. When this information came out, and we put this information out, first in the Kukutuntum, and then in a series of Blog Talk Radio broadcasts, some of these individuals would like to try to say that Ma'al doesn't exist. Not because the divinity doesn't exist, because they were ignorant of who the divinity is. Yet they've been misinforming our people and promoting themselves as experts, pseudo-linguists, pseudo-scholars, pseudo-elders and eldresses, pseudo-priests and priestesses, pseudo-culturalists, and so forth. So when a normal person gets some information about some aspect of our culture that they were unaware of, then they're glad to get the information because it's something they can incorporate, they can verify, incorporate, and expand and share with other Afro-Akani people. When somebody is misinformed and also immature, spiritually immature, they begin to panic because they saw that Ma'a is a real divinity. They've been promoting themselves as experts in some fashion. Then people start questioning them about, well, if you didn't get this basic understanding about one half of the divine law that governs all of creation, then what else do you not understand about ancient Khanid and Kemet? What else have you been misinformed about? What else have you been misreading? And they began to become challenged. So some of them, recoiled and began to promote this foolish idea that the deity Ma'al doesn't exist, or is something that's simply made up because they couldn't understand what was going on. They would rather pretend like the divinity doesn't exist to preserve their fragile, foolish ego and preserve their foolish, little fragile reputation, as opposed to embracing reality. So we're bringing the reality today. So first, Ma'at in general, truth, integrity, uprightness is dealing with genuineness, law, and so forth. And that's because the forces in nature that govern law and balance in creation, we will name law and balance after the divinities. Now, if you look, for example, in this inscription, you see that different spellings of the name of the male deity Maat. You'll see it says U220, P400, M571, N1178, and then Duat 11. Those are the references. So when some fools say there are no references for a male deity named Maat, or that's just something made up that came into being later, these are the references. This is because these fools were not studying what they purport to study. The reference here is the pyramid text or the Meru text of Unas. This letter U represents Unas. If you look at the index of the book, you'll see it's Unas, utterance 220. Then the pyramid text of Pepi the First, utterance 400. The pyramid text of Mer in Ra, utterance 571. The pyramid text of Nefer Ka Ra, which is Pepi the Second, utterance 1178. And then the Duat, the 11th hour of the Duat. So you'll find this deity and his name and so forth in these various places. So first and foremost, let's look at a specific text just to corroborate that. Let me make sure you can see this. Okay, so we said it said the 11th hour of the Duat. So the book of the Amduat, the book of what is in the Duat, the Shat Amduat, is dealing with the spirit realm, the 12 hours of the night, and the sun rises and goes to the 12 hours of the day, the sun sets, rises in the boat of the Aten, underneath the sun, and then it goes into the underworld in the night boat and sails across during the 12 hours of the night. And those 12 hours are 12 divisions of the Duat, the spirit realm. When the Aten, the sun, is moving into the underworld and so forth, the spirit realm, and Ra within that boat. Ra is connected to the Aten and animates the Aten, animates the sun, and so forth. So every one of these different divisions of the Duat, or the spirit realm, has a number of different divinities, and a number of different things are happening in these different hours or divisions of the Duat, 12 hours of the night. This book, the book of the Amduat, deals with that. They said the 11th hour, that's what the reference said, the 11th hour of the Duat, you will find the name of the divinity Maat. So we go to the 11th hour. This is the 11th division. I'm going to give you a quick reference here. The 11th division of the Duat, which is called Re Nkeret At Katu. Now, this specific text is Budge's text, Wallace Budge's text, the Egyptian heaven and hell and so forth, but the images are taken directly from the tomb of Seti. Hold on one second. And if you go to that, when you pull up that actual imagery online, you will see these texts are taken directly. These are representations of those texts. Then photographing these texts and putting them back together, redrawing them and so forth, every single glyph in the exact same place, just tracing them out. So if this is the 11th division, okay, and whoever gets, you want to make sure you mute yourself when you log in so there's no background noise. All right, so get to the 11th division, we should find the deity Maat. We see some deities here. And then we see this deity Aptawi, Mer in Awiyef, A in Awiyef, Reset Afu, Dwa Heru, and then we have the divinity Ma'a. His name with the sickle, the forearm with the open palm, and the plinth. That's the divinity Ma'a. So that's an image of the deity Ma'a. It's not some other divinity. This is an image of the divinity Ma'a. He's been in the text for all time. He's always been there. It's never been a time when he did not exist. So just because individuals didn't know where he was, that doesn't mean he doesn't exist. Now, and then the text that's associated with him is also, you'll see here, it says, those who are in this picture, through this great God called by their names, my hidden appearances and my secret radiance calls your life, O ye who advance to your kahibit, your shadows, who are free to move or are shrouded in respect of the arms by the form of in his holy places, whose breaths are of the utterances of my mouth, which give life, and you speak therewith, whose offerings are on my boat, wherein your spirits live. You who have water at the source of Nu, wherein the dwellers in the Duat wash with shouts of joy. Perform that which it is your right to do, and let your spirits be in the following of my created things. Talking about this group of divinities. Their work in the Duat is to advance the hidden things of this great God to the hidden house each day when they appear with this great God in the upper heaven. So he's talking about the collective of divinities. This is what Ra is saying about this collection of divinities, what their roles are as a collective. Now, if you go to the tomb of Seti, I pulled up the picture a few days ago, but I couldn't find it, but I'll pull it up and I'll post it next week. You will see this very exact same picture and you'll be able to verify that it's the same divinity. Some fools tried to say that when we posted this picture of Ma'a right here in the text, that it really wasn't a picture of the deity Ma'a. The text was broken and it really is Ma'a has a different deity, and we just didn't understand that the name was rubbed out, which is pure stupidity. This is the divinity Ma'a, and we can corroborate that. Because if you look, the book of the Duat is found in various tombs. The tomb of Seti, the tomb of Tahuti Mesu, the tomb of Ramesu V, and the various divinity, various, kings and so forth, and so you can look in and various papyri. So you can look at a number of different texts of the 11th hour of the Duat, not just from the tomb of Seti that you see here, but you can look at another text. And if you look in the 11th hour, you should be able to find the divinity Ma'at. You should find these various divinities like Dwa Heru, Ma'a, Nesketi, Hepa, and so forth. And then you'll see, actually, this text is actually side by side, but because they put it on 8.5 by 11, they broke it in half and put some deities below. But normally these 8 deities are all side by side. These 4 are behind, and then they're behind these 4. So let's look in another text to see if we can find the 11th hour of the Duat and see what we find. Okay, so this is the book of the Amduat on papyrus, what they call papyrus Zagreb, E605. This is from the Archaeological Museum in Zagreb collection, It provides the hieroglyphic text with its transliteration and translation of Papyrus Zagreb E605. The papyrus fragment contains hours 10 through 12, so 10, 11, and 12 from the Amduat, dated to the 21st or 22nd dynasty during the third intermediate period. The text describes renewal of life in the natural cycle of the sun at the end of the adventures of the joint nocturnal journey of the god Ra and the human soul. So 10, 11, and 12. Now let's look and see what we have. First, we're going to go back to the Amduat, the other Amduat text, and look at those divinities. So in the tomb of Seti, we see Mer in Awiyef, the plow, the N symbol, the forearm with open palm, another forearm with open palm, and the viper. So that's Mer in Awiyef. That's one divinity. Then you have Aw in Awiyef. The reed is the A sound, the little chick is the U sound, the wavy line is the N sound. The forearm with open palm is two of them, so it's Aw, but then it's two of them, so it's Awi. And then the viper again, so it's Aw in Awiyef. Then you have Reset Afu. The sedge plant of the south is Reset. The term for south is Reset, and southern is Resi. This little sedge plant, the lotus sedge plant and so forth, is the Reset. And then you have the T symbol and Af with the three strokes, which is plural, so Reset Afu. Now remember, these four are really, in the original text, they are actually behind these four. So you see Reset Afu right here, the sedge plant and so forth. You see Reset Afu right here, because actually they cut this portion and put it on top, and then they put the next four on the bottom, but they really are behind here. So you have Merin Awiyef, Awen Awiyef, Reset Afu. Hold on one second. Reset Afu, and then after Reset Afu, you have Dwa Heru. The Dwa is this five-pointed star. The falcon is Heru, so the name of that divinity is Dwa Heru. And after Dwa Heru, you have the divinity Ma'a, with his name with the plinth, the Ma'a plinth, and the sickle, and the arm with the open palm. So now, let's see what the other text has. You have Mer in Awi F. This is the viper. This is the plow for Mer. This line is the line for N, so wavy line. Mer in Awi F. That was the first deity. Then you have the reed All in Awi F. Once again, that was the second deity. Then you have the sedge plant, the Reset Afu. Let's go back to that real quick. That's the Reset Afu. That's Reset Afu with the sedge plant. Then you should see Dwal Heru. You see Dwal, the five-pointed star, and Heru. And the next deity is the sickle with the plant, and that is Ma'a. So once again, and if you look in any tomb or papyrus or temple dealing with the Duat, the Shat Duat, and you look in the 11th hour of the night, you will find these same divinities, because it's the same text that was written and provided for people who transition. You will find the male divinity Ma'a in the 11th hour of the Duat, just as it's referenced in Budge's dictionary, but we don't just go by the reference, we go and check it out to see this is a primary text. And we have the, we can give you that link, that Zagreb, Papyrus Zagreb 6350. Or I'm sorry, E605. So once again, we have the divinity Ma'a here. So any one of these fools saying the deity doesn't exist, the deity is here with the text intact. That's just reality. Now, the question has to be, why haven't we seen anyone most of these people talking about the divinity Maat? Why don't we understand who he is? People are writing entire books on Maat and never mentioned the god Maat one time. Writing texts, taking people back and forth to Kemet for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, never mentioned the god Maat one time, the Ntoro Maat one time. We're going to show, of course, that Maat also exists in the Akan language by the same name, with the same function and so forth, same thing in Yoruba tradition and so forth. But so first and foremost, we want to show you an image of the male deity standing there next to his name, showing who he is. This is a New Empire text. And this is during the Third Intermediate Period. And when you look at the text of the Duat, just to go back, now, Amduat is the name used for a specific form of the Egyptian Book of the Netherworld, which was the most complex composition of eschatological texts during the New Kingdom, so-called 1550-1069 BC. The earliest attestations of the Amduat, or the Shatan Duat, the book of what is in the Duat, the spirit realm, appeared in the decoration of 18th dynasty royal tombs. Now what you find, so this is a New Empire text. Now we're going to go back to the earliest religious compositions unearthed so far anywhere in the world, which are the Meru texts, the pyramid texts. And we'll find the divinity Ma'a in those texts. So the earliest texts, we'll find him. During this New Empire, we'll find him. We'll also look at a late period text and you'll find Ma'a as well, showing that he's spanned across from the earliest times all the way to the late period. By the time the Greeks invaded and so forth, every era of Kemet, Ma'a was known. So let's go back to our, all right. Okay, I just want to make sure you can see that. Okay, so we said that the U represents the pyramid text of Unas. P is Pepi the first, M is Meru and Ra, N is Neferkara, which is Pepi the second. So first, let's look at Unas 220. When you look at the inscriptions and when you look at the reference, the particular reference is Gaston Maspero's text. That was, they were looking at the Meru text in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and so forth. These texts were written in French. So you go to the French text. This is one of the easiest ways you can get to it. You can download it for free on archive.org. This is the text here. And what they did was they took the pyramid texts of Unas and Pepi the first and Pepi the second and Meru and Ra and Teti and so forth, took images of them and copied each text line by line, glyph by glyph, faithfully recording each text. How do we know that they faithfully recorded the actual text in the pyramids back during that period in the so-called 19th century, early 20th century? Proof of that is a number of different ways. Here's the easiest way you can prove it, because we don't want to just trust that they copied everything down, faithfully. We have to prove that. If you look on this website, this is just one of many websites. Pyramid text online, pyramidtextonline.com. You go inside, you'll see that the entire set of pyramid texts of Unas are on this site. You have the complete English translation, and they'll show, for example, the sarcophagus chamber, the south wall, east wall, gable, west wall, gable, north wall, every part of the pyramid text, every area. They copy the text, they have the translation, but they also have, which is most important, the complete hieroglyphic version. On the west wall, for example, this is an actual image of the text from the west wall. This is an actual image of the text from the east wall. And every text, you can find the actual photographs of the glyphs. And of course, you can expand them, enlarge them, and what you can do. And what we have done is you look at the actual text from the pyramid of Unas, the Meru of Unas, then look at the text of Maspero that's written in French, but he has all of the glyphs there, and go glyph by glyph throughout the entire text to make sure that what he put out there over 100 years ago is a faithful rendition, replication of what's on the walls of Unas, that we can actually see the primary text. That's what we have done, and it is proven to be true that they actually copied the text faithfully. And of course, when they were doing that, they were not planning that 100 years from that point, Black people will be flying back and forth to Kemet and getting their hands on these texts. They were recording them for themselves. So they were trying to get them as accurately as possible so that they can try to decipher them themselves. So they were doing this for European scholars. It had nothing to do with Black people. So they recorded glyph by glyph exactly what they saw on the walls. They took images of that, and then they, reduplicated them and put them in books and so forth, and have been studying them ever since. But we were able to prove that by getting the primary and comparing each one. And that's an important piece. So now that we have that understanding, we can actually go to the text. All right, so now we're going to look at they said Unas in utterance 220. This is the section from Unas, utterance 220. We're looking for MAA. Now remember, if you look at the name MAA, it can be spelled in different ways. The sickle with the little tongue of earth, elevation of earth, and the forearm with the open palm. So those three symbols, MAA, sometimes they're on top of each other, sometimes side by side and so forth. So let's look at what we have. If you look in the Unas text, 220 as the reference says, what you'll find here is the MAA name. Now let's look at a translation real quick. Faulkner translates this as, I have come to you, Nebuchadnezzar. I have come to you, the evening barge. I have come to you, true as she over the red. I have come to you, she who remembers the cause. Remember him, Unas. And then you'll find James Allen with the same text. He'll say, instead of saying, I have come to you, he translates it as, someone has come to you, Nephthys, which is Nebuchadnezzar. Someone has come to you, night boat. someone has come to you, pilot covered in gore. Someone has come to you, place where Kas are remembered. May you remember him this unas. Now we give the actual translation. It says, I have come to you, Nebuhet. I have come to you, Sektet boat. When they say the night boat, that is the Sektet boat. You see the boat in the day, the morning sunrise boat, when Ra's in the morning boat, sailing across the sky and so forth. That's the Manchet boat and so forth. You see Ra inside of that boat. You see the Aten inside of that boat. You see the female divinity Maat in that boat of sunrise. But then when the sun sets, they disembark from that boat and get into the Sektet boat, which they call the night boat. So when it says someone has come to you, Nebuhet, someone's come to you, night boat. Faulkner says evening barge, but that's still the night boat. Someone has come to you, pilot covered in gore. Faulkner says, true is she over the red. Then someone has come to you, place where Kas are remembered. May you remember this unas. Actually, what it says is, I've come to you, Nebuhet. I've come to you, Sektet boat, meaning the night boat. I have come to you, Ma'a, the god Ma'a, Her Cherut. I've come to you, Meskat, remember him, unas. But Ma'a, Her Cherut. Let's look at that specific representation. What you have right here, oh, this is the wrong one. Let me make sure I didn't, okay. Now it says, I have come, the two legs walking, to you. This is Neb, Het, the vessel is Neb, the square is Het. Notice they have Nebit Het, but they don't have a determinative. Normally what you have is a determinative of a seated female or a cobra serpent. That means it's a divinity. But sometimes they don't put the divinity there. They'll just put the name of the divinity, Nebit Het, without putting the determinative saying this means it's a deity. Very often, especially in later texts, they will always have the determinative, but sometimes they don't have the determinative in the hieroglyphic or the pyramid text. But I have come to you, Neb-Het. I have come to you, Sek-Tet, boat. This is the boat. You see the little boat, falcon inside of it. So that's Sek. Sometimes they'll say Semket boat, but it's Sek-Tet boat. I have come to you. This is the sickle. This is the earth, Ma'a. Then Her, Cherut. Then it's the determinative of the scribe's palette and the stylus and so forth. Ma'a, Her, Cherut. And the determinative of the falcon on the standard. The falcon on the standard, the falcon Heru on the standard, is a determinative medut, denoting that this is talking about a deity, as opposed to just the word Ma'a meaning true. So in this representation, Ma'a is called Ma'a Her Cheru. Why is he called Ma'a Her Cheru? That's one of his titles. This is Her, this is Cherut, and the determinative of the falcon on the standard showing Ma'a Her Cheru is a deity. Oh, 1 second. Now, the reason why Faulkner says true is she over the red, first they would try to say, well, what they meant to say was Ma'at Her Cheru. So it's true as she over the red, which is inaccurate because it doesn't say Ma'at. There's no symbol for the T. It says Ma'a. That's one reason they said that. But he's referencing it as a title of a divinity. Allen says a pilot covered in gore. covered in blood. When he says a pilot covered in gore, he's talking about sometimes when the sun rises, sometimes when the sun sets, the sky becomes reddish and so forth. And he's trying to say that the pilot of the boat or the pilot of the night boat covered in gore. He gives reference number 39, a reference saying the reason why he says that is because it has something to do with the redness of the sky, and that's gore and so forth. But that's foolishness, because that's not what the text says. That's speculation, but it's not what it says. Now let's look at something real quick. Her cherut, and then the determinative. We're going to look at the hieroglyphic dictionary real quick. We're going to make sure you can see that. Okay, head, and it's not there too. The tethered rope is the ch sound. It can also be the k sound. Just like ch in English can be the ch sound, like in change. Ch in English can be the k sound, as in chrome. And that comes from these, glyphs from ancient Kemet. It can be the ch sound or the k sound. So here's her, cher, tu. What you'll find is her, cher, tu. Then this, and that's in the text of Unas 5:10. You also see the representation that we just saw, her, cher, tu. The stylus, you see the little pad that the scribe used, and the paintbrush that's the scribe's, utensils and so forth. The divinity on the standard. Now, why would they say pilot covered in gore? Pilot, they'll say MAA means pilot or guide and so forth. And then her means over. They'll try to say that means covered. And then cher tu, why would they say cher tu means gore? What? That's absurd, because they're trying to come up with an explanation. This is the reason. Cheru means to paint, painting. They put writing in parentheses, but these are the devices, the implements of the scribe, the sesh, the scribe, the paintbrush, and the palette of the scribe. So cheru means to paint, painting. It can also mean color, paint, but cherut, a god, then they put or a goddess. Why did they put a god or a goddess and a question mark? Because in one rendition it says cherut, and very often when the name of divinity ends in a T, it's a female divinity. That's in the text Unas 220 that we just looked at, Her Cherut. That's a deity. It doesn't mean covered in gore. When they say color or paint, the reason they say pilot covered in gore or covered in paint, they're like, well, the sky becomes reddish, so we'll say that's the paint, and it's red paint, and that's why you see Faulkner saying, true is she who's covered in red and so forth. But that's foolishness. Cherut doesn't have anything to do with covered in red. It's the painting or the scribing. But god or goddess Cherut, often when the T is the last, form in a name, then it's a female divinity. But there's more than one representation. You have Cherut, but in this representation in Unas 5:10, you have Cherut tu. So it's not, it doesn't end in T, it actually ends in TU, Cherut tu. So it's actually a male divinity. If we go back, and we have to go through this just to prove this point. Her cher tu in the text of Unas 5:10 is her cher tu. The final glyph is the U. You'll also find in the pyramid text of Ptah or Teti 323, her cher tu. So that's very similar to the divinity Mentu. Sometimes his name is written Ment, sometimes his name is written Mentu or Montu, the war divinity of Ta'apet. So he's Ment or Mentu. Here you have Cherut, but in the more than one rendition is Chertu, showing us a male divinity. The term head or heri means chief or above or over or overseer. And then cher, as we just saw, means to paint, writing, color, paint, and so forth, the scribe's utensils. The scribe's implements, writing implements, chair, charut, and so forth. So Ma'a, Her Chetu, is Ma'a, the chief of the scribes, the chief scribe, the chief one who codifies. Law is the codification of divine wisdom. So you have Ra and Ra'at, the creator and creatress. We're going to talk about Tahuti, the male force of divine wisdom, the spokesperson of Ra and Ra'at and Amen and Amenet, and Seshat, the female force of divine wisdom, the spokesperson on the female side for Amen and Amenet and Ra and Ra'at. But once they speak what the Supreme Being declares, then you have the scribe that codifies the law and writes it down, codifies it. We codified it by writing with a stylus and having the palette and so forth. Ma'a, the male deity of divine law, is the head chief, Chertu, scribe. Naturally, that's his function. So this is why he's called Ma'a, head Chertu in the text. But that's not the only text that we have with regard to him. But we had to go through that point just to prove what's going on. So in this particular text, you see Ma'a, the sickle, earth and so forth, Ma'a, head, Chertu. Here it says Cherut. In the other text, it says Chertu. So we can prove that, male divinity. So he's referenced as a male divinity, Ma'a, Chertu, and most importantly, as the determinative for a falcon, meaning it's actually a deity. It's not just the concept of law. Some fools will try to say, well, when you see Ma'a in the pyramid text, it's just talking about the law concept or truth and righteousness, and it started off as a concept, and then thousands of years later, the concept was personified into a deity, which is pure stupidity. When people say that, it's because they were caught misinforming people for decades, putting themselves forward as experts for decades and didn't know what they were talking about. So here, the determinative of a divinity proves it's a deity from the beginning. Now let's go to the next reference. In Budge's dictionary, they said, in the pyramid text of Pepi, you'll find the divinity Ma'a, once again, in utterance 400. This is utterance 400 for Pepi. And we have a little translation down here. So first you'll see that in the text of Pepi, Allen says, "O you who ferry the marooned one, who is righteous, ferryman of the marsh of reeds." Pepi is one righteous or true, which is Ma'a, before the sky and before the earth. Pepi is one righteous before the island of land that he has swum to and arrived at, which is between Nut's thighs. He is a dwarf of the gods' dances and entertainer before this great seat. That's Allen's translation. Then Budge's translation, "Hail, ferryman, thou boatman of Maat, who does transport souls to Sekhet Aru. This Pepi is true before heaven and before earth. This Pepi is true before the island of earth. Pepi swam and arrived at that which was between the thighs of Nut." Nut is the goddess up in the atmosphere. She's bent over the earth and so forth, bent over the earth divinity Geb. You see, she gives birth to the sun in the east, and she swallows the sun in the west. Her womb is in the east, where she gives birth to the sun. Her face is in the western hemisphere, western horizon, where she swallows the sun at night. You'll see the stars in her body and so forth. So when they say he swam through the darkness and swam into Nut's thighs, he's talking about going into the eastern realm of heaven to be born through the sun with Ra at the east at sunrise, through the quote unquote thighs of the great mother divinity Nut. So if you look at Budge's translation, hail ferrymen, the divine ferrymen, the boatmen of Maat. So in ancient Khanid and Kemet, when someone transitions, that's akin to the sun setting in the west. And they'll call the people Westerners, Amintu, those who went into the west, went to the land of the setting sun, the land of the dead. The sun goes down in the west and goes into the underworld and disappears until it's resurrected or reborn or reincarnated on the eastern side of heaven, you know, in the morning. So in the same fashion, we say that when the sun is set on our lives, then we go to the west, the beautiful west and so forth. And that is the realm of the gateway to the ancestresses and ancestors, the gateway to the underworld. There's a river that must be crossed after you transition in the west to get to the Sekhet Hetep, the divine field of peace, where the Sekhet Aru, the divine field of reeds or divine food and so forth, is in that divine field, but you must cross that river. There's a ferryman in a boat, and you give him certain sacred offerings and so forth, and then he will ferry you across the river. That is true in ancient Khanid and Kemet. In the Akan tradition, when people transition before they are able to go to Asamando, the ancestral realm, the land of the Nsamanfo, there's a divine ferryman that you must give offerings to. And when you give offerings to him, then he will ferry you across the river in his ferry boat, Ferry, and then take you to the land of the ancestresses and ancestors. This is why in our Khan tradition, when someone dies, for example, when an Ohenia king dies, they don't say he died, that's considered disrespectful. They have a euphemism for saying that the king has transitioned. Same thing in the Yoruba tradition. They'll say, if they say the king has gone through the roof, that means he has transitioned. In our Khan tradition, when they say the Oheni, the king, has crossed the rivers, that means he has transitioned, the king has died. He has crossed the rivers, the river that divides, the dividing line between the physical world and the spirit realm. It's the exact same river in ancient Khanid and Kemet, and there's a divine ferryman in a boat that takes you across, if you lived in harmony with order and you had the sacred offerings. This is the very same deity that was corrupted into Kiran, or Chiran in Greek, the divine ferryman in the boat. When people die and you have to give him certain coins and so forth, and he will ferry you across the river Styx and so forth to the Elagian fields and all of that. That's directly stolen from ancient Khanid and Kemet. So there's the divine ferryman, and the divine ferryman, as you see here, says, "Hail ferryman, thou boatman of Maat, who does transport souls to the Sekhet Aru, the divine field of rushes and reeds and so forth." This Pepi is true before heaven, before earth, and all of that. Let's look at what it actually says. Chawi is the ferryman of truth. They say the Egyptian Karam. As a ferryman, he's the one that ferries, so that's a title. Chawi is simply a title. It's actually a title of the god MAA. Now, the term enchant means ferry boat. So enchant is spelled different ways. Enchant, sometimes with the chant sound, sometimes with the shent sound. You'll see that sha and cha in ancient Khanid and Kemet, the glyphs for that interchanged, but it's the ferry boat and so forth. So if you see here, Chawi, the ferryman of truth, you'll see Chawi, that's the divine ferryman right here. This is the first part of the text. Then the spelling Ma'a, the sickle, the tongue of earth, the forearm with the open palm. Ma'a, and then chant, the Ma'a boat. Chant is the ferry boat. So the divine Chawi, divine ferryman of the Ma'a Mchent, the Ma'a boat of the Sekhet Aru, this Pu Pepi, or I'm sorry, and this one is Meru and Ra and so forth. He is Ma'a. This is Ma'a once again, under or before. And by the way, there's the boat of the rising sun, male divinity with the beard and so forth, determinative, Ma'at boat. Then you have the boat of truth, which is the Ma'ati boat. But divine ferryman, Chawi, of the Ma'a boat, Mchent, of the Sekhet Aru. This, in this instance, is actually Meru and Ra, but the same text for Pepi as well. This Pepi is Ma'a, under or before heaven, before earth. This Pet is heaven, Chair is under or before, then Ta is earth. And this Pepi is under, so this Pepi is Ma'a, under the island of earth. So it says this Pepi or this Meru and Ra, but it's the same text. This king is Ma'a, the god Ma'a before heaven. He's the god Ma'a before earth. He is Ma'a before the island of earth. He swam to that which is between the thighs of Nut. Now we're just going to go right to the very same text. So each king has the same text. You see Pepi, they say the same thing, the divine ferryman of the Ma'a boat. So there's a ferryman who governs the Ma'a boat. Who's the ferryman? If your name is Ma'a and you run the ferry boat, or if your name was Kwame or Kwesi and you were a ferryman, they'll say, who's the person who works on the ferry boat? Who's the ferryman over there? They'll say, well, Kwesi is the ferryman. Here, the god Ma'a is the Chawi. He's the ferryman. How do we know he's the ferryman? Because he's the ferryman of what kind of boat? The Ma'a boat. It's the Ma'a Mchent of the Sekhet Haru that goes into the Sekhet Haru. Then it says this Pepi is Ma'a before heaven, before earth. This Pepi is Ma'a under the island of earth and so forth. So now let's look at the text of Neferkara, which is Pepi the second. You have the very same construction that you have in the Meru and Ra text. You have Chawi, divine ferryman. Then you have Ma'a Shent. Let's look at that. You have Chawi here. Then you have Ma'a, the owls, and Chent, the boat. So that's the Ma'a boat. And here the determinative, you'll see the determinative of the falcon. It's a little blurred. It's determinative of falcon showing that that's a divine boat. The Ma'a boat is a divine boat. So it's saying the same thing that the Meru and Ra text says, Chawi, the divine ferryman of the Ma'a Chent, the Ma'a boat, which is a divine boat, of the Sekhet Aru. Then it says, this Pu Neferkara Pepi. So that's Pepi the second. He was called Neferkara. It says, this Pepi is Ma'a. But the difference with Neferkara's text when it says, oh, hold on a second. When it says this Pu Neferkara Pepi the second is Ma'a, it includes the falcon with the standard. So in this particular text, it's saying this Pepi is the god, talking on the standard Ma'a, before heaven and before earth, exact same text as the other ones. This Pepi is Ma'a under the island of earth. He swam to that which is between the thighs of Nut. So in this particular text, Pepi the second, Neferkara, it says this Pepi is the god. He's identifying himself with the god Ma'a, the god Ma'a. The earliest religious texts in existence are identifying the divinity Ma'a as a divinity, as a male divinity, not just a concept, but a divinity. You find in the text of Unas, Ma'a is called Ma'a Her Cheru, as we can see up here. He's Ma'a Her Cheru, the chief copyist or scribe, and then the determinative for divinity. So he's called Ma'a Her Cheru, that's his title. But then when you look in the text of Neferkara, he's simply called, this Pepi is identified with Ma'a and the divinity determinative. He's just called Ma'a in that particular text. So we've seen the earliest religious compositions in existence. They're talking about the male divinity Ma'a. He's associated with the ferry boat and the Sekhet Hetep and the Sekhet Aru, the divine fields of peace with the divine rushes and so forth, field of reeds and so forth, in the ancestral realm. That means when the sun sets, it's the end of life. You cross the river, you get on the boat of the ferryman. The ferryman, his job, the ferry on the ferry boat, Chawi, the ferry boat, Ma'a is working as a Chawi, as a ferryman. That's one of his roles. And then he will ferry you across if you lived in harmony with order. Now we talked about the Maat boat, the boat of truth, and the other Maat boat of the rising sun. You'll also find that we have the term Ma'a, which is cordage of a boat, cordage of the bow of a boat. What is this association with these boats associated with Ma'a, as well as Maat? So first, let's get an image real quick, just so you can see what's going on with regard to Maat in this similar rendition. And if you have any questions, of course, you can post them in the chat room. Okay, so you have, for example, here, this is Nut, the sky goddess. Her womb is in the east, the head is in the west and so forth. But Geb is the earth divinity. Geb and Nut are earth and sky. He's the earth's crust specifically. She's the atmosphere. Very often you see the stars in her body. You'll see the boat of the divinity Ra, but you'll see Ma'at sitting in the boat with him. In other representations, you'll see Ma'at in the boat on this side, and the boat is tilted, showing that it's the rising sun. So Ma'at, the female divinity, is in the boat of the rising sun. But then we just talked about Ma'a, the male divinity, in the boat of Ma'a, the Ma'a boat, which is dealing with the ferry boat that you enter into. You talked about the Sektet boat, the night boat, talked about in the pyramid text of Unas, the Sektet boat, or the evening barge, or the night boat. When the sun sets and we go into the underworld, then you get into the boat of Ma'a. So when we're talking about the forces of divine law and balance, the balancing point of the day, the first balancing point of the day is sunrise. That's when the sun comes from the underworld. It crosses the horizon, the balancing point, and then it goes up into the sky. Then it goes to the highest point in the sky, then it begins to set. And then at the evening point, meaning the balancing point, the horizon point, it crosses that balancing point and then goes into the underworld. So sunrise and sunset are the two balancing points. Then you have high noon, and then you have midnight, which is the deepest point and darkest point in the underworld. You have Maat at one balancing point. You have MAA at the other balancing point. When people are coming into the world, being born into the world and so forth, the sun is being born and so forth, Maat is in the boat of the rising sun. Then when the sun sets and people are leaving the physical world and going to the spirit realm, into the night boat and so forth to go into the underworld, that's where MAA is, and he's the ferryman. If you look at the balancing points of the year, sunrise is akin to March 21st, which is the spring equinox, the balance of day and night, 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness. Spring equinox around March 20th, March 21st, and so forth. And then that's the first balancing point of the year, the equal nights, equinox. Then days become longer and longer and longer till you have the longest point day of the year, which is the summer solstice, the hottest time of the year, which is akin to during the day, the noon, high noon, and so forth. 15 hours of sunlight, 9 hours of darkness, but then the days begin to become shorter until it gets once again to the balancing point, equal nights, equinox, the fall equinox, first day of fall, September 22nd, September 23rd in the Northern Hemisphere. That is 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness. That is the balancing point. And then it goes into the underworld. Then you start going towards winter. It's darker and darker and darker until you get to December 21st, the winter solstice, the darkest, coldest time of the year, which is akin to midnight, the darkest, coldest time of the day. But winter solstice, darkest, coldest time of the year, December 21st, 15 hours of darkness, 9 hours of sunlight. But then after that period happens, then the sun begins to increase about a minute or more per day until you get closer and closer to the balancing point. So you have Ma'a and Ma'at during the day, sunrise and sunset, Ma'at and Ma'a. During the year, sunrise is the spring equinox, that is Ma'at. Sunset, which is the autumn equinox, that is Ma'a. They govern the balancing points of the year. They're the forces of divine law and balance. They regulate balance within our bodies, within our spirits, within the earth, within creation. Now, and we're going to get into the cosmology of the ferry boat and so forth. We're really going to get into the cosmology of the ferry boat next week, but we want to get into this other iconography, proving once again that the deity, male deity Ma'a, exists. So first we're going to go to give me 1 second. Okay, so another representation, and you saw this on the flyer for the class. We showed an image of this sacred baboon and so forth, sitting on the balancing point of the scales of Ma'at. And the reason why we show that baboon is because that baboon is actually the male deity Ma'a. Now, many people are unaware that this is the male deity Ma'a. He's been right there. People have been talking about the balancing of the heart and the feather and so forth for years. There's the balancing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at. And when you pass that test, you can move to a certain region of the ancestral realm. But after you balance your heart against the feather and show that your heart wasn't weighed down by disorder and so forth, so it's light as a feather, because if it was weighed down by disorder and lust and malice and so forth, you had a heavy heart because of that, then the scales would tip. The heart is the repository, just like physically, repository for the blood and so forth, and it pumps the blood through the left side and sends all the oxygen and nutrients and so forth throughout the system, through the circulatory system, pumps the blood out through the arteries, but then through the veins, all the deoxygenated blood comes back to the heart through the veins, to the right side of the heart. Then the blood is sent through the lung system, is purified through the fire of the solar, fire of the air and so forth. Then it goes back into the left side of the heart and it's sent out through the arteries. So the heart receives, and is a repository for the blood and all the nutrients moving through, as well as some toxins moving through, but then those are purified. In the same fashion, the spiritual heart, the Ab, is the repository for all of your energetic experiences, that all the projections that you've received throughout the course of your life, plant life, animal life, mineral life, other Afro-Akani, human life, and so forth, spirits of the ancestors and ancestors, as well as those who are unrelated, any interactions you've had, any energetic projections that you have received, your heart receives that and records that, just like your brain receives the conscious cognitive things and memory and so forth of everything that's taken place, the energetic expressions and emanations that have impacted you from every time you interact with any aspect of creation is registered in the heart. If you don't purify the heart and you hold on to certain things, your energetic force becomes heavy, and then your heart doesn't weigh against the feather. So, balance against the feather. So this is why the heart is weighed against the feather. The spiritual heart, the Ab, and we have a whole class on the spiritual anatomy. We talk about that. But after you go through that weighing scene where your heart is weighed against the feather, there's another challenge you must go through. There's an extensive interrogatory with the god Ma'a. It is one of the most extensive chapters in the Runu Pert Imheru, the so-called Book of Coming Forth by Day, the so-called Book of the Dead. It is one of the longest chapters in the entire text in the various forms of the Book of Coming Forth by Day. You go through the weighing of the heart and against the feather in the hall or the dual hall of Maat, and after you come through that, you must go through the extensive interrogatory with the deity Ma'a. If you don't pass that test, you're not allowed to go into the ancestral realm with the pristine ancestral community. You become an earthbound spirit and so forth. That's always been part of the text. So why have our people typically not heard of that? Because the whites and offspring don't typically focus on it. And once again, our people are imitating the whites and their offspring, so they don't even know Ma'a is in the Runu Pert Imheru, and they don't even know about that second most extensive interrogatory. And once again, that interrogatory is a series of questions. That interrogation with the god Ma'a actually has to do with the makeup of the divine boat and the different aspects of the ship and what they do and their sacred functions. So once again, it takes you back to the divine ferry boat. So Ma'a is associated with that. So we're going to get into some of that, or we're going to get into all of that in the next class, but we want to focus on showing who this divinity is. So another part of his iconography, and to prove it in Akan, Yoruba, and in ancient Chaldean command. So you see the weighing of the heart, and you see this baboon sitting on the equilibrium point of the scales. So who is this divinity? Why don't people talk about this divinity? We know Ma'at represented by the feathers in the pan, but actually the male deity Ma'a is sitting atop the scales. You will find him sitting atop the scales in various papyri. This is a late period papyrus, weighing of the heart and so forth. You have Anpu checking the plummet. You have Tahuti recording the results. You have Ma'at with her feather on her head sitting in the pan. You have Ma'a, and here his name is Up, sickle and plant, Ma'a. Up means judge, Ma'a. Judge Ma'a, sitting upon the balance of the scales. In the tomb of Pa Nintui during the Nubian period and so forth. You see him sitting upon the balance of the scales. You see his sister Maat sitting in the pan and so forth. And you see Tahuti, he is taking note and recording the results. Now it's very important first and foremost to show who this monkey is and why he's represented as a monkey, a sacred baboon, what that's dealing with. But first, we want to look at I'm going to go back to the, actually, we'll go back here. No, actually, we can go to the, hold on one second. And we're going to put this in the, okay. This is the Stela of Neferurenpet. Yeah, let's make sure you can check that out. This is the Stela of Neferurenpet. Very important for our discussion, because what you see is Tahuti in the form of the man with the head of the habui bird and so forth, lunar disc on his head. And then you see the sacred baboon proffering the eye of Heru to Tahuti. Sometimes Tahuti takes the form of a sacred baboon. Sometimes Set takes the form of a sacred baboon, as well as Nebuchadnezzar. There are a number, that's an animal totem, it's an ancestral animal totem. So in the same fashion, sometimes Nebuchadnezzar and Set will take the form of hawks and so forth. They can take the form of sacred baboons. Tahuti can take the form of a sacred baboon. But he's not always in the form of a sacred baboon. Sometimes when you see the sacred baboon, if it's talking about Tahuti, his name will be there and it will say this is Tahuti in the form of the baboon, but sometimes he is not. In those representations, we saw that Tahuti was recording the results and the baboon was sitting on the equilibrium point of the scale. This goes back here because some fools will try to say that Tahuti is standing there taking the, taking note of the results of the weighing of the heart, but then the baboon on top of the scale is also Tahuti. He's bilocating, he's in two places at one time, which is foolish. In reality, that's the god Maat. As we show his name, Maat, Judge Maat, is right there above his head. Sometimes they don't have his name written at all anywhere on the text. Of course, our people knew who he was, so they didn't always have to write his name, just like sometimes they don't write the name of other divinities in a papyrus. You already know who's who just by virtue of what's going on. In that particular late period text we just showed you, it says Maat, talking about that's the title of the divinity. But it's important to show the distinction between when Tahuti is a baboon and when he's a habui, the habui bird, the so-called ibis, sacred animal totem, and then the monkey, the sacred baboon, as his assistant. In this representation, the sacred baboon is his assistant. He's proffering the eye of Heru. The eye of Heru is the eye through which we see clairvoyantly. We can see spirits walking around. We can see the aura around someone. Ever since you were a child, if you were able to see if there was a deceased grandmother, great-grandmother, grandfather, great-grandfather, you see that spirit walking through the house and so forth, you're seeing beyond the physical. The quote-unquote uchat, or the third eye, allows you to see beyond the physical. We call it uchat in ancient Kemet. In Akan, we have the term for it as well. This and symbolism for the quote-unquote sacred spiritual eye that's always been part of it. The third eye doesn't come from the Europeans, it comes from this uchat right here. The same eye, that uchat that was given by Heru to Alsar to resurrect him, the opening of the mouth and the opening of the eyes and so forth. The same uchat that's being proffered here. It's an offering to the divinity, the great God of wisdom and divination and writing and so forth, Tahuti. So now you have a representation of Tahuti and the divinity Anan. The terms, general term for baboon is An or Anan in ancient Kemet. In Coptic, that's rendered as N or NN, but Anan and so forth. This is Anan, which is a title of Ma'a. Anan simply means baboon, just like Habui simply means ibis bird. The name of the deity is Tahuti, but he takes the form of a habui of an ibis bird. So sometimes he's called the great habui or the great ibis, but his name is Tahuti. Ma'a can take the form of sometimes he's the form of a man, as we saw, but sometimes he takes the form of a sacred baboon. He takes the form of an Anan. And because he takes the form of an Anan, a baboon, he's that sacred Anan. Ma'a is the sacred Anan. Up Ma'a, Judge Ma'a, who sits on the balance, divine balance point of the scales, while his sister is sitting in the pan. Ma'a, Ma'at working together for balance. Sunrise, sunset, spring equinox, fall equinox. He takes on that form, so he's Ma'a in the form of Anan. So first, where do we get that from? Where do we get the reference point for how this baboon divinity becomes an assistant to Tahuti to show there's a distinction between Tahuti and the baboon? So when some fools try to say every time you see a baboon near a scale, it must be Tahuti, sometimes he does take the form of a baboon near the scale of Ma'at, and he takes note of the weighing as a baboon. But sometimes the baboon is there and Tahuti is also there, and they're working together, just like they are working together here. So where do we get that reference point from? If we go to the book of the cow of heaven, the book of the heavenly cow, so-called destruction of mankind, we see when Ra speaks in that book and he tells Tahuti that Ra is going to go further up into the heavenly realm. He will not be ruling on earth any longer. He's putting Tahuti in his place, and he's going to give Tahuti an assistant, and the assistant is the quote-unquote dog-headed baboon called Anan. So let's go to that text and see when Ra makes that declaration, so we can prove that this is a representation of the great God of wisdom and his assistant. So we're going to go to that particular text. Okay, hold on one second. Let me get that up. Okay, so we're going to pull this up real quick. You can download the book of the cow of heaven of the destruction of mankind. You'll find that in various places on the net. Okay. So you'll see this in the destruction of mankind. It says, and the majesty of this God said, call to me the God, Thoth, which is Tahuti, and one brought the God to him forthwith. The majesty of the God is Ra. And the majesty of this God Ra said unto Tahuti, let us depart to a distance from heaven, from my place, because I will make light and the God of light cool in the Duat and in the land of caves. You shall write down the things which are in it, and you shall punish those who are in it. That is to say, the workers who have worked iniquity or rebellion. Through you, I will keep away from the servants whom this heart of mine loathes. So he adds to Huti, hey, let's go up into the mountain region, away from those who are paying attention, because we need to, make some plans. And Ra takes the form of divine light. And then Tahuti goes up into the mountain to meet up with Ra in the form of the divine light. Tahuti wears the disk of the moon and so forth. Part of that has to do with the moon meeting the sun, and there's a eclipse and so forth, and the sun infuses the moon with this light and so forth. Ra is going further into the heavenly realm and says, Tahuti, you are now going to be my representative on earth. I'm not going to be on earth anymore. I'm tired of these people down here. I'll rule from the heavenly realm. He talks about establishing the Sekhet Hetep, the divine field of peace in this text, and establishing the Sekhet Aru, the divine food that's going to be in the divine field. And he said, if anybody wants to come connect with me, they have to follow and come after me, but they must come through you. So the great God takes the form of a divine light. He asked his servant to come up into the mountains to behold him in the form of divine light. He told him, Tahuti just said, write down those things that are in the spirit realm so we can, punish those who work iniquity and rebellion and so forth. Tahuti is called Ma'a Keru, which means true, a voice, the one who speaks. Keru, the divine law of Ma'a. Ma'a Keru or Ma'a Ker became Ma'a Sher, as is pronounced in Akan. And Ma'a Sher became Ma'a She and Moshe and Moses. So when Moses goes up in the mountain to talk to the God in the form of a divine light or burning bush, and the God tells him, you're going to be my representative. You need to write down what is in the spirit realm, and we're going to work. You're going to punish those who work rebellion, meaning you're going to write down the law, meaning he's given the 10 commandments to scribe and so forth, and he's going to go back to the people and lead them to the promised land. And the great God is going to create the promised land, the land of milk and honey with divine food falling from heaven. That entire Mosaic text is stolen from the destruction of mankind text, and it's laid out in detail. We cover that in the Kuku Tuntum. So they stole the name of the divinity, Ma'aher, became Moshe, and Moses, the God in the form of divine light, the entire piece. So he says, through you I will keep away from the servants whom this my heart loathes. You shall be in my place, Asti, and you shall therefore be called O Tahuti, the Asti of Ra, meaning the one who has taken the place or seat of Ra on earth. He says, moreover, I give you power to send Hab forth. Thereupon shall come into being the Hab or Habi, meaning the ibis, animal totem for Tahuti. He says, I moreover give you the power to lift up your hand before the 2 companies of the divinities. When they talk about Moses rising up a serpent, a brazen serpent and all that, and he has rulership because he's been given that power to rule over the people, this is where they stole it from. He gives him the power to lift up his hand before the 2 companies of the deities who are greater than him. And what you do shall be fairer than the work of the divinity Ken. Therefore shall the divine bird, Tekni of Tahuti, come into being. Then he said, moreover, I give you the power to embrace Ankh, the 2 heavens, with your beauties and with your rays of light. Therefore shall come into being the moon god, Yah, of Tahuti. Then he says, moreover, I give you the power to drive back Anan, the Had Nebu, the masters of the north and so forth. Therefore shall come into being the dog-headed ape, Anan, of Tahuti, and he shall act as governor for me. That's the cosmological foundation for the text, where Tahuti is given an assistant, Ma'al Sher, later Moshe, is given an assistant called Aran. And Aran, A-N-A-N, Aran became corrupted into Aran or Aaron. So Moshe and Aaron, or Moses and Aaron, comes from Moshe and Aran. He was given that assistant by Ra, just like Aaron was given as an assistant for Moses. So they stole the whole thing. But the dog-headed ape, Aran, becomes the assistant of Tahuti. So this is where we get this assistant of Tahuti, that representation. So the dog-headed ape, Anan, is the assistant of Tahuti. Tahuti is the divine wisdom, the spokesperson, the high priest of Ra and Ra'et and Amen and Amenet and of the universe and so forth. Now, and he has an assistant. And the assistant is the form of a monkey, a dog-headed ape. And as we've shown, his title is Up Ma'a. That's one of his titles. Let's look at this relationship of this monkey that we're talking about, who's sitting on the balancing point of the scales of Ma'at. In late period texts, in the text from ancient Khanit, Nubia, and so forth, during the New Empire, you see him there. What is the relationship between this sacred monkey and the divinity of wisdom? Why is there an association? And this, by the way, is our book that you're looking at. You can download this book. It's one of our 31 books. All of our books are free that we've written. We've written 31 books so far. We have more coming out. Tahuti. Sankofa Fa Nifa, male deity of divine wisdom and divination in Kemet, Akhan, Ede, Fon, and Yoruba. So we're showing that Tahuti exists in the various traditions. Let's first deal with in ancient Khanit and Kemet, the term for nose in our ancestral language is spelled in the Medutu hieroglyphs FNT. Europeans put an E in between consonants when they don't know what the proper vocalization may be. So they just approximate that. That's a convention in Egyptology. If you don't know what the vocalization is, if it should be an A, O, I, U, whatever, they just stick an E between consonants. But it's spelled F with the viper, N, the wavy line, T is the loaf, and then this is a determinative of nose. So fent, which is really fenet, is the term for nose. But you'll see in the Coptic dialect, Copt, shenet or shante, but also shenet, shant. In the late period of Kemet, about 2,000 years ago, when the Coptic dialect, the last dialect of the language of Kemet, was becoming more popular, one of the versions is shenet. So you have fenet or shenet, and here you have the cage symbol, which is pronounced shenet in Coptic, the nose, shant or shent. So you have fent or fenet, shent or shenet, both of them mean nose. In Akan, you see the HW can be pronounced hwet, like shwet, shwet, but it can also be pronounced fwet, FW. This is why you see in the dictionary HW, also FW, depending on the pronunciation. The word ehwene in Akan means the nose, but when it's pronounced with the FW sound, it's fwene, it means the nose. So in Kemet, nose is fene. It's also shene, as we've seen. In Akan, the nose is fwene, but it's also shwene. So two different words for nose in ancient Khanit and Kemet. you'll find the same two terms for nose in Akhan. The word for eye in ancient Kemet is eni. The word for eye in Akan is eni. The word for mouth in ancient Kemet is aro. The word for mouth in Akan is ano. We can go down the list. There are thousands of terms. Every single root term you find in the Medutu and the hieroglyphs in ancient Kemet. Every one of them, not just 2 or 3 terms, but all of them, you will find in the Akhan language with the exact same meanings. We also have the exact same deities by the same names with the same ritual colors, governing different aspects of creation, solar, lunar, planetary bodies, oceans, rivers, mountains, atmosphere, and so forth. The exact same deities with the exact same names, with the exact same ritual colors governing the different aspects of creation, with the same familial relationships in Akhan as we find in ancient Khanate and Kemet. And our books prove that, because we're the same people. And the same is true for Yoruba people and Ebe people and Bakongo people and so forth. This is just an example. So we're talking about here, we don't have to go through all of that, but because we talked about nose, fenne, and so forth, fenne, as pronounced in Akan, one of the titles of Tahuti, he of the nose, meaning the great beak, the nose. One of the 42 judges in the Hall of Alsar, a name of Tahuti. Here's fenne or fenti, but the N is nasal, so it's fant or fanti. That's how fenti by some, fanti by others. Is another representation of that. They even show the nose itself. He of the nose, a form of Tahuti, fenti or fent. But it turns out that the Yoruba people pronounce the name of this divinity, this title of the god of wisdom, is fant with a nasal N, fant. So instead of fanti, it's fant, fant, and they cut it off. That is Ifa in the Yoruba tradition, is Fa in Vodun, it is Afa in Igbo. The male deity of divine wisdom in Yoruba is Orunmila, and his title is Ifa because he governs the Ifa system. But Fa, as the title of the god of wisdom, comes from Fant in ancient Kemet, the title of the god of wisdom. Tahuti is Orunmila, and his title is Fant. And this is where it comes from. Fa comes from that. You will find that in the Yoruba tradition, when they're trying to figure out the origin of Ifa divination, they'll say Fa means to scrape or to scratch. And let's just show that real quick. In the Yoruba language, the term Fa means to scrape, to scratch. It also can mean to shave, clean, wipe. A related definition is to pull, draw, lead. Some Yoruba people like Wande Abimbola and Ifa will mend our broken world says, well, since Fa means to scrape or scratch, and they're talking about when they make divination marks and scrape or scratch into the Oponi Fa, the divination tray, in the Iyerosun, the divination powder and so forth, after they pull or draw the Ikin, the palm nuts, and Fa, pull or draw, and then they scrape or scratch, into the powder on the Oponi Fa, the divination tray. They'll say, well, since Fa means to scrape or scratch and also to pull or draw it, for example, he says in Ifa will mend our broken world that maybe Ifa came from Arab sand divination because they scrape in the sand, but they don't know the origin of their divinatory system. The origin of the divinatory system is Tahuti. His name is Fa or Fant, he of the nose. And when you look at his function as a sacred animal totem, what you'll see is the great Habwi bird who is using his nose, Fa, Fant, to scrape, to scratch, fa, to pull or draw, as you see pulling this from under the surface. So he digs deep, scrapes or scratches the soil, digs deep under the surface to pull out something that's unseen to the seen so we can be nourished by it. When you go do deep Ifa divination, you scrape or scratch the surface so you can go into the spirit realm, to the unseen, and pull out, draw, pull out fa after you scrape, scratch, fa, pull out what you need, the wisdom you need to remedy situations in the present, in the world of the seen. Fa means to scrape or scratch. Fa means to pull and grab. Your nose scrapes or scratches or pulls or draws in air and so forth. It scrapes up air and pulls it in and so forth. It's the same divinatory process, the same movement of the fa Tahuti in the form of the habwi bird. That's the origin of the divination practice. Why is that important? Because we can show that Ma'a and Maat exist in the Yoruba tradition. And we have to understand this notion of the twins, Ma'a and Maat, the twin divinities, the balancing points of creation, the divine polar complementary opposites in creation. In Yoruba, they are called the Ibeji, the deities that govern, that are the twins. They are the patron divinity of twins. They are the twin divinities. The Ibeji, Ibi means birth, and G, or G means two, the twin or dual births and so forth. So there's a story about who the Ibeji Orisha are. There's a male and female twin divinities. They are children of Orunmila and Peregunlele. So let's look at that real quick, and then we'll see why it's relevant. Orunmila, the Orisha of divine wisdom, that is Tahuti in ancient Kemet, as we've proven by even his name Fa. That is Sankofa in Akan, by the way. So one of the oral traditions, the origin of the Ibeji Orisha. When they talk about the Ibeji Orisha, the forces of divine balance in creation, the divine twins that regulate all balance in creation, where did they come from? One of the oral traditions in the literature of Ifa describes the relationship between Edun and Ibeji. This is the sacred literature. It says, may the sacrifices be accepted and blessed. This is the verse of Ifa, which talks about Ibeji. It talks about who the Ibeji really are on earth and what they are from heaven. It discusses especially how they are on earth in a position of honor and as something to be greatly regarded. Out of the 400 Imole, which is spirits of the right, and 200 original Imole of the left, the Ibeji have been counted together with them before that number was established. Meaning they have always been, before the other Orisha, the Ibeji have always been there. They are not an addendum. How the Orisha are among human beings and how their honor and their ashe dwell with all things everywhere. That is how the matter of Ibeji also is. This is because the Ifa verse, which discusses them, talks about how Orunmila, deity of wisdom, nicknamed Ajana, first gave birth to the persons who are known as Ibeji in very ancient times. These persons who were children of Orunmila are known as Edun. The Ifa priest predicted for her that she would have 2 children at the same time. They predicted that the children would turn Orunmila into a king. They asked Orunmila to perform sacrifice with 2 rats, 2 fish, 2 hens, 2 pigeons, 2 goats, and 21 cowries. Orunmila performed the sacrifice. Peregun in this text, but in other texts, Peregunlele, who became the wife of Orunmila, she became pregnant. So Orunmila is married to Peregunlele. He made the proper ritual offerings, and therefore she became pregnant. And when she delivered, she gave birth to twins, one male and the other female. They called them Edun, which in English is the colobus monkey. The male one started to study Ifa. So the 2 children looked like monkeys. That's what they're saying in the ancient text. They look so much like the Edun that people were calling them Edun, meaning monkeys and so forth. The male one started to study Ifa. The Ifa which he learned was not as great as the one which he knew before he was born. Meaning when he was in heaven, Orun, he learned Ifa, but when he came to earth and was born as Edun and so forth, he learned Ifa, he became a priest of Ifa, the male one, but the Ifa he learned on earth wasn't as great as the Ifa he learned before he was born. But it was fine for earth. So the male Edun became a priest of Ifa. As a priest of Ifa, he's apprenticing with his father Orunmila, who is the high priest, the god of wisdom. This is the Edun, the monkey, the colobus monkey, who is the apprentice of the god of wisdom. So let's go back and just refresh the memory real quick. Let me make sure you can see that. In ancient Khanid and Kemet, this is the god of wisdom. His apprentice is the sacred Edun, or the monkey. So in Yoruba, the god of wisdom, Orunmila, the god of wisdom and divination, has twins with his wife Peregunlele. They give birth to two monkeys, and the male monkey, the male one, becomes a priest of Ifa. And when you become a priest of Ifa, you apprentice with your elder for a number of years, and sometimes it's 16 years before you can begin to practice Ifa. So now the great god of wisdom, Fa, called Fanti or Fa in ancient Kemet, Fa Ifa in Yoruba, has an assistant as a monkey who's learning Ifa. Now, he says the boy began to visit his mother's other children. He started to go to their homes. He understood the language of animals very well. Everybody said they looked like monkeys and so forth. So he went into the forest and was living with the animals and everything because they were his mother's children. He understood the language of birds very well because they too were his mother's children. He also spoke the language of human beings. Then another point in the story is introduced. It talks about a king who got lost in the forest, and then he went and he came across the male Edun, who he thought was just a regular monkey, but then the male Edun assisted him to find his way out of the forest, and then the male Edun was celebrated and so forth. And then they talk about that celebration and the honor and everything else. So the king loses his way. He's in the wilderness. He can't find his way. He goes to the quote unquote priest of Ifa, the apprentice, the male divinity, who's the child of the god of wisdom. And he goes to get divination, and he finds his way out of the wilderness, just like when we're in the wilderness mentally, spiritually, don't know which way to turn. We go get divination from a priest or priestess, and then we find our way out of that spiritual wilderness. So the god of wisdom is Tahuti. He's called Fam. He has an assistant called Akan in ancient Kemet, which means baboon, monkey. In Yoruba, Ifa, the god of wisdom, and he has an assistant called Edun. In the Coptic dialect, Akan is pronounced Eran, Enan. Eran in ancient Kemet becomes Erun in Yoruba. The exact same name for the monkey, the exact same name for the divinity, the exact same relationship between the two. There's a male Edun came to earth, and he became a priest of Ifa, an assistant of his father. Female Edun didn't come to earth right away and become a priestess of Ifa. That female Edun, the female monkey, is actually Odu, the female Orisha Odu, that is the repository for the codification of law in Yoruba. Odu, of the Odu Ifa, that is actually Maat. So you have the female Edu, which is Odu, the female Edun, which is Odu, and then you have the male Edun. Two monkeys balancing, they're twins, polar, complementary, polar opposites. They're complementary balance in creation. They are represented as monkeys, children of the divinity of wisdom. Now let's look in the Akan tradition for quickly. So we'll see, once again, you see this monkey here, and you have the eye of Heru. We said you look through the eye for clairvoyance. That is a divinatory instrument. Any Akan person who sees that, if they've never read any text before ever, as soon as they see that, they know exactly what they're looking at. They know that's a divinity, animal totem of the divinity. They know that is a divinatory instrument. Why is that? Oh, hold on a second. Amongst the Baule and Ivory Coast, there are 11 million Akan people in Ghana, about 9 million Akan people in Ivory Coast, and Baule is one of the large Akan groups in Ivory Coast. Baule Mbra, monkey figure. It's found in an auction and so forth. A fine example, very heavy wood, additional information. Monkey known as Mbra, Mbra, and sometimes referred to as Bekre by the Baule, are considered as power figures used in many rituals. One ritual is a trance divination where the spirit of Mbra assists the diviner in his effort to convey messages from the spirits of the other world to the living in order to solve a problem during a consultation. This is the one rare occasion when an Mbra can be seen to everybody. When not in use, the Mbra will be displayed on the shrine. Now they talk about some of them, the way they look and so forth. The word for law in Akan is Mara, Mbara. In the Akwamu Akan dialect is Mbara, Mbara, M-B-A-R-A, Mbara, the same as the name of the monkey, Mbara. The word for law is Mbara. The root is Ma, and then there's a stem, Ra, which is a exclamatory. So for example, if you have the term Ba, which means come here. And if you want it to be imperative, you instead of saying Ba and yelling it, you say Ba, Ra, or Bra, come. That means come with an exclamation point. You're adding the stem Ara to the Ba. So Ba means to come, but Bara says really come right now. Imperative, Bara. You have Ma, and the root, that's the root, but then Mara is the imperative. It's the same structure. Mara in Akan means law. The root is Ma, but in Akan you have that stem add to it and it becomes Mara. The word for soul in ancient Kemet is Ka. The word for soul in Akan is Ka, Ra, written Kara. The word for spirit of life in ancient Kemet is Ba. The word for spirit of life in Akan is Ba, Ra, which is Bara. So you have Ka means soul, Kara means soul in Akan. Ba means life, spirit in ancient Kemet. Bara means life, spirit in Akan. Ma means law in Kemet. Mara means law in Akan. Ka, Ba, Ma, Kara, Bara, Mara. And we have many other examples as well. In other words, the monkey with the divination bow, his name is Mara, meaning translated in ancient Kemet, Ma. There's a monkey named Ma who's the assistant to the divine, the assistant to the Abosomfo, the assistant to the high priest. The high priest, the Abosomfo, has an assistant who's in the form of a monkey with a divination bowl that he gives and shares offerings with. The name of the divinity, Mara, is MAA, which is the god of law and balance, the assistant of the high priest. It's the same function, same role in Akhan as you find in ancient Ghanaian Kemet. Same name of the deity, same function, same divination bowl. So we mentioned that in our book, and we have different representations of that. This is another one, the monkey with the divination bowl. Assistant to the Abosompo, the high priest. The oracular sculpture shown here is found on the shrines of Akan diviners. This includes Akan people in the Western Hemisphere who practice the Akan tradition, which is called Hoodoo in North America. They're not reading any texts from ancient Kemet, but they have a shrine with a monkey, with a bowl in front of the monkey and so forth for divination. And we look into the bowl for divination. That's part of water gazing and so forth. When we engage in our Wabo, Jira, Adebisa, that form of divination we use in the Akwamu Nation of North America and so forth, Akwamu Mine, Amarukai Tifimu, as we talk about in our film, we look into that divination bowl and communicate with the Abosom, communicate with the Nananom and Samaf. We've been doing that for thousands of years. Same thing in our Khan tradition on the continent. The Abosompo, the high priest, has a monkey standing there with a bowl that you look into for divination. It's a divinatory instrument. And just to bring that full circle, Ka, soul, divine consciousness, Ba, spirit, divine living energy, Ma'a, divine law. That's an ancient Ghanaian Kemet. In Akan, Kara, which is Kra, soul, divine consciousness, Bara, which is Bra, spirit, divine living energy, Mara, Mra, which is divine law. That is the same Mbra, the name of the monkey. Different variations of the monkey with the divination bowl. There's a larger bowl and so forth. But now we have the same in ancient Kemet. You have sometimes the monkey is giving the eye of Heru, which is a divinatory instrument, and only people who practice the religion would know that right away. White Egyptologists just think this is representing the giving of the eye of Heru and the divine eye and all of that, but they don't know what it is. That is a divinatory instrument that we use to look into to see the Nsamanfo and the Abosom, the ancestral spirits and the deities. That same monkey can have a bowl. This is a monkey from ancient Kemet, an ancient sculpture. Just like the sculpture over here of the Akan with the divination bowl, that comes from ancient Ghanaian Kemet. For thousands of years, we've been doing the same thing. Here, we pull it together, both symbols, the bowl and the divine eye arising from the bowl, meaning when you look into the bowl of water and other elements that are placed in the water for water gazing, then you can see through that medium into the spirit realm. So this proves the connection. Plus the name of this baboon, this Aran, his name is Ma'a. As we showed on top of the scale, he's called this is the sickle and the plinth, Ma'a, the horns up, Ma'a, or judge, Ma'a. Here's the monkey here. Here's Tahuti, who's taking note of what Anpu and Heru are balancing on the scale. Ma'at is sitting in the pen with the feather on her head. Ma'a is here on the balance, the equilibrium point, and Ma'at is in the pan. And the same thing, Ma'at is here with the feather on her head. Ma'a is sitting there on top. Ma'a, the judge, Ma'a, and so forth. Ma'a, Ma'at are working together for balance, for equilibrium, literally balance and equilibrium. The male and female Edun, or Edun, or Edan, the male and female monkey, the male and female forces of twin balance in creation that regulate all balance in creation. Same thing in Yoruba, same thing in Akan, same thing in ancient Ghanaian and Kemet. So what we've shown first and foremost, in the most ancient religious text in existence, the name of the divinity Maat exists, including the determinative showing that he is a divinity being spoken of in the book of the Duat and so forth, in different renditions. In the 11th hour of the night, you'll see the male deity anthropomorphic in the form of a man with his name Maat written next to him. It's not some broken text. It's the same thing. And you look at various texts in the 11th hour of the night. We're also going to look in the late text next week, and you'll find the divinity Maat, the late text, the Nehem papyrus, the male deity Maat, not Maat. When people talk about the book of knowing the evolutions of manifestations of Ra and of overthrowing God Pep, and they talk about the, Atem creating the world, and Shu and Tefnut and Geb and Nut and so forth, and Asar and Aset and Set and Nebuchadnezzar and so forth in the Nehem papyrus, and they say he says he's laid a foundation in Maat. It does not say he laid a foundation in Maat. It says he laid a foundation through the god Maat specifically. And there's a cosmological reason for that and why it's spoken in that fashion. So we've shown the actual divinity, shown his name attested in the text, shown his function and one of his primary functions as a force of divine law and balance, counterpart of Maat, showing their correlation and corroborated in the Yoruba tradition with the exact same deity, with the same, apprentice and so forth, same apprenticeship in Akhan with the Abo Sonfo, the high priest, with the sacred monkey for divination and so forth, all across the board. Now, next class, we're going to get into the cosmology, that full cosmology of the divine ferryman, and why is Maat as the balancing point of the setting sun and the balancing point of the equinox, equinites, and so forth, the ferry boat crossing the river that separates the physical world and the spirit realm when you're going into the underworld. He's dealing with the Sektet boat and so forth, the night boat, the Ma'a boat, not the Ma'at boat, but the Ma'a boat as it says in the text and so forth. Why is he associated with the ferry boat, ferrying people across to the spirit realm when they showed that they lived in harmony with divine order? There's a whole series of texts dealing with the function of Ma'a as the divine ferryman. And we're going to get into that, into some detail. Okay, so we went a little bit over time. I wanted to get a lot of this information in. First, in the first class, we wanted to complete that portion of it. So it's after 10 o'clock already. A couple of questions in the chat room. If you're an earthbound spirit, is there any way for you to be accepted? Like if the spirit aids someone in guidance. So when we talk about an earthbound spirit, so if someone is repelled, from, we always use the example, you can look at the spirit realm just like the way you look at the physical realm. If you were living in harmony, out of harmony with order, you were causing problems, robbing people, stealing from people's houses and everything else, and people had a family reunion and everybody came. If you tried to show up, you're not going to be let into the reunion. You're not going to get let in the house. You're not going to get let in. You're going to get forced out, pushed out, beat down, whatever it is. But you're not going to be able to dwell with the community and celebrate with the community and all of that because you were engaged in disorder and you're repulsive. If you lived in harmony with order, the doors would be open. Same thing is true in the spirit realm. If you had lived a life of disorder, then your spirit is repulsive. So like two magnets with the same polarities facing, all you have to do is get near another magnet and you will be repelled without even getting close enough to engage. Your spirit is repulsive. Now, if you're repulsive because you're just a little self-destructive, you became an alcoholic, or you just were depressed all the time and things like that, you can be a little repulsive, but you can work on yourself spiritually and, reverse that polarity and be accepted at some point. But if you were a child molester or, doing something crazy like that, you will never be accepted. You'll always be earthbound, and you'll be subject to the torture of other discarnate spirits who are also earthbound as well. And then you can reincarnate into a womb space in a situation where you go through a great deal of trauma yourself because you created trauma and you did the same thing. So sometimes when you see people, they grow up and do what they're doing and They seem like everything is going fine. They have an amazingly traumatic experience. Sometimes it's because of what they've done in a previous lifetime. And sometimes when we see people seem like they get away with a lot of stuff and they die in transition and seem like they never paid for it. Well, some of these people you see suffering heavily, those are the same kind of people who thought they got away with something. They suffered in the spirit realm, and then they came and were born into a situation. They thought everything was fine. And the next thing you know, they have an amazingly traumatic experience. Sometimes that's the reason. Not always, but sometimes that's it. But if you're earthbound because of basic self-destructive things, then you can transform your, it's your responsibility to transform your existence, to, engage in spiritual development and so on and so forth. But if you were, criminal and your Ka, of course, and Ka is separated, or Ka is separated from you, then there's no acceptance period. You're going to continue to suffer. Okay, so it says, I've seen videos where they talk about zodiac seasonal changes. They have explained that each zodiac era. So what is the input on that? If you look on our site, let me give you a link real quick. We wrote an article dealing with that, and it's on our WordPress page. And let me see, where is that? Okay. We'll give you the link real quick. If you go to our WordPress page, you'll find it. Okay, so when you go to this, the Achinebois article on our website, you will see that we're talking about the sacred animal totems, the original zodiac signs from which the Greeks stole these different animal totems from the deities of Kemet, and the actual dates. Astronomical zodiac, there's actually 13 constellations that cross the ecliptic, not 12, and they're not all 30 days each. So we list that. We talk about what a zodiac actually is, the different divinities, and the dates they actually enter into these, signs and so forth. So we go into some detail about that. And the final question was, how many deities are on the day boat, and who are they? How many deities are on the night boat? So in different texts, sometimes they switch out certain deities in different texts. So sometimes you may see 8, sometimes you may see 7, and so forth. And it switches out. So when you look at the different texts, you'll see in different periods who's who. We can touch on some of those. In fact, either next class or the class after that, we're going to go into some more detail about that. So we'll get into those. But when you look, when you're Googling and you're looking at the boat of Ra, or the bark of Ra, the solar boat of Ra, solar barge of Ra, and so forth, depending on the text and the era, they'll have different divinities in each one. So, but we don't want to go too far over for people's time. We're 15 minutes over right now. So one thing we are doing, some of you are aware of this, some of you may not be. We have our just so you can see this, what we've done. So for those of you who are aware, we released our documentary film last year. We were accepted to a couple of film festivals. We just last week received an award for Best Original Documentary when we went to the film festival in New York. So we were doing that, and we're still, getting the film out there and so forth, and working to get it on the big screen in different cities. We did a number of cities where we showed it, in small Black-owned businesses and on smaller screens and so forth. But now we're working to get it in theaters, independent theaters and so forth. So that's what we're doing. And when we went to the festivals, it was shown on the big screen in theaters. So, but in concert with that, we are having our own film festival, which is going to be annual. The first one will be in October during our Hoodoo Nation Festival weekend. This is our 6th annual Hoodoo Nation Festival. We're dealing with the Akan tradition in North America, but we're going to have our first annual Kanche, which is the Conjure Film Festival. The films will deal with the forms of ancestral religion we preserved in our blood circles here in the Western Hemisphere: the Hoodoo tradition, Juju tradition, Voodoo tradition, Wanga, Grigri, Gullah Geechee, and so forth. Various films based on that. We put this information out there. We established a website. We're seeking out, filmmakers to submit their films specifically on that subject. It can only deal with ancestral religion, born of our blood circles, no Christian nonsense, none of that foolishness, Hebrew Islam, none of that foolishness, no integration, no unconditional love, all that stupidity. We're dealing with our ancestral religious practices as we teach that. And different filmmakers, males and females, will be coming forth, submitting films. We're going to have a number of films. We are working on our second film, as a matter of fact, and it will be featured at the film festival in October. We went to a couple of theaters last week to check them out. And one of them we have settled on. So what we're doing now is we're raising the funds for the initial deposit. The theaters cost, over $5,000 to rent and so forth, like $6,500 to rent for 10 hours. But that's the way it is. But we can seat like over 260 people in the theater. We'll have a number of films. So we want to get those filmmakers to have their films on the big screen so we can educate our people, empower our people, eradicate this Christian, Muslim, Hebrew, Moorish, pseudo-Native American, all this pseudo-spirituality, pseudo-religious nonsense, eradicate that foolishness from the minds of our people, and recognizing that our ancestral religious practices born of our blood circles are the foundation for our ancestral nation building and restoration and the defense of our sovereign nation. But we have to be grounded in our ancestral religious values, principles, morality, and so forth. So those are the kind of films we'll be showcasing. But we have a fundraising effort. If you'd like to support that effort, we have 8 people supported it over the past 3 weeks since we just released it. And yet I'll say to those who have contributed, this is the link in the chat room. We'll post that. But we'll be meeting with the other festival. We'll be meeting with the other theater within the next few days. So we want to be able to put the deposit down to secure the theater, and then that way we'll be able to, begin to really push the festival and get the, filmmakers on board, begin to advertise. If you have a business and you'd like to sponsor or, post your business on our film website, and the film website, you can check that out also. It's Kanche Films. It's a brand new website that we established just for the festival. And you can see that the film festival website here. So that's the Kanche Film Festival. We have a section, we talk about Kanche, what the film festival is about. We also talk about the term Kanche, which is the Akan term for conjure, but you can also find it in the Medutu with the same meaning as an ancient Canadian Kemet. So we talk about the foundation of that and what we're doing. And then there's a section that we've added to the website. You can advertise your business with us. When you advertise your business, we will post it not only in the book that we're going to have when we have the film festival, but we also have this section here on the website. It's a new section we just created where your image for your business will be. So every time people visit the website, they'll see your business. We've been getting about an average of 2.6 million hits on our Odwirafo.com website on a yearly basis. And that website is linked to this website. So when people come to the website, go to our other website, they come here, and we're posting this new website, so people are getting turned on to it, and as more filmmakers and trailers get posted, more and more people will be coming to the website to buy tickets for the festival, see what films will be coming out. They'll be seeing your information, so you can get a $35 ad or a $50 ad posted. It'll be on the website permanently, all the way through the film festival and so forth. So when people, see it, you'll be able to get some revenue for your business, also supporting the work. And we also have a sponsorship option as well if you want to, sponsor the film festival. We don't get corporate sponsorships from non-Black organizations. We don't get any grants. So to cover these expenses, to rent out the theater and all of that, it has to come from the work that we're doing, selling our books, as well as, support from the community. So Yedase, for those who have contributed, please contribute if you can. And we're going to keep everybody updated on the progress of that when we have our next meeting with the theater coming up in the next couple of days. All right. Okay, so Yedase, we thank you for joining in with the class. Next week, we're going to continue and go into detail in the pyramid text, and we're going to dissect the pyramid text on this whole notion of the ferryman cosmology, which most people have never gone into in our community. We're going to give it from the proper perspective, dealing with actual ritual experience of who these deities actually are. So, Yedase, we thank you for joining in, and Yabesha Dio, we will meet again. That's it.